Okay, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of ULI Toronto, you are very welcome to today's program. My name is Tom Coyle. I'm a director at BTY Group, and as people start to trickle in, we're going to play an Urban Land Institute spring meeting video, and I'll see you back shortly. Thank you very much. ULI Toronto prepares to welcome 4,000 people from across the real estate and land use industries to Toronto next May the 16th to the 18th, 2023. This is your chance to make valuable connections, listen to unparalleled speakers, and join exclusive tours. To learn more about 2023 ULI Spring Meeting, there will be shared links in the chat. So once again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Coyle. I'm a director at BTY Group, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting today's session, District Energy Global Leadership. The Toronto region is celebrated as one of North America's leaders in district energy technology, from urban to suburban, deep lake cooling, thermal batteries, geothermal, and sewer energy. These advanced innovations are significantly reducing our community carbon emissions. Globally, the acknowledged leader is the city of Copenhagen, with more than 98% of Copenhagen's municipalities' heating demand covered by district energy. Before we get into this, as always, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto region-based organization, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on virtually is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. ULI Toronto stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities, demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. We'd also like to acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those who were brought here through enslavement. To better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, ULI recommend 4 programs that have been uploaded to YouTube. These links are also available in the chat. Today's event and all other ULI programming would not be possible without the support of ULI's annual sponsors. I would like to thank all sponsors for their continued support. Now more than ever, ULI Toronto relies on the support of sponsors to put on high quality programs such as this one, and to drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. Thank you to today's event sponsor, BTY Group. To all of the sponsors, thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Chuck Schillick, real estate developer, environmentalist, professor, and contributor at Urban Land magazine. Based in Washington, DC, Chuck is a real estate developer, financier, lawyer, and professor who has directed the graduate real estate programs at Georgetown and Johns Hopkins universities, as well as an energy and environmental expert. With a packed agenda, we might not have time to get to the audience Q&As, but we encourage you to submit your questions in the chat. And with that, I invite Chuck to take over.
Thank you, Tom. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to ULI Toronto's District Energy Global Leadership Panel. We have a diverse set of experts from both Copenhagen and Toronto today, and separate panels for Copenhagen and Toronto, to be followed by a joint panel from both cities. Please note all bios are available through the chat function. Now I'm going to briefly introduce the Denmark panelists. Lars Hummelrose, the Managing Director of DBDH, which is the Danish Board of District Heating, and Maëlle Casario, who is an energy planner at the Municipality of Copenhagen. Thank you, and please make your presentations now.
Thank you, Chuck, for the introduction. My name, as said, is Lars Hummelrose. Let me just go to the next slide. I'm the Managing Director in Danish Board of District Heating. It's a Danish-based organization. Let me take the next slide. Because I've just shortly introduced what we're working with. Is an organization that's promoting district energy for sustainable city transformation. That's the role of our small organization here. And we are a membership-based organization with 75 members. We have a mix of utilities. We have technical service providers, also companies who produce technology, and also some advisors who know about how to build a new district energy system. What we do seminars, we do training, we do exchange of know-how, and then I'll just promote a little bit about our magazine coming out 8 times a year. Can go directly to your mailbox, taking some case stories around from the world about some very good case stories that can be inspiring in developing more and better district energy. Next slide, please. So what I will get into is what I call the fairy tale of Denmark. What's the role of district heating here, and how we got here, and also what is the future role of district heating. And then afterwards we'll be following more, going into what is the framework in Denmark, and then we'll go into the Copenhagen case afterwards. So just like step 2 slides forward. Then in Denmark, you can see I just have to ask, can you hear me clearly? I have a
yes.
sign. Okay, good, thank you. On the left side of your screen, you can see the energy consumption for space heating. Energy consumption for space heat. The top line going up is the floor space heated. So from the 1990 up till in 30 years up to today, that space has increased to 30%. But final energy consumption has been more or less stable throughout that period. So that means we have been able to use the same energy and increase the heated area with 30%. And also the consumption, final energy consumption per square meter has decreased with more than 20%. And how is that possible? Well, of course, it's isolation, it's better windows. So having some building codes that has been increased for every second or third year. So we always say the energy you don't use is the best energy. So of course there will always be number one, use less energy. On the right hand side, you can see how are we heating our buildings in Denmark. Denmark, you also have to remember, is a small nation. We have more people living in Toronto than we have in Denmark, which is about 6 million. Maybe it's about the same. And in Greater Copenhagen, as we hear about later, there's about 1.3, 1.5 million people living there. But if we look at the heating installations, now we're looking at the total in Denmark. Well, back in the 80s, well, we were dependent primarily on oil, but there have been a shift away from oil, and we have then some natural gas because historically we have had natural gas. We don't have so much anymore. But then district heating, the middle column has been taken over. So we're now covering about 2/3 of all households in Denmark are covered by district heating. So it's a major shift towards district heating as a prime source of heating the households and the housing in Denmark. Next slide, please. But even when we look then at what have we delivered with district heating, we've been able to lower the CO2 emissions from the heat from district heating. The black line you see on the top showing that the CO2 emissions on the right side has decreased from about 5 million tons CO2 to put into less than half. It's about so we've been able to reduce almost 2/3 of the CO2 in that period in the district heating delivered. And on the other graph, you can see in the diagram that renewables has covering about 2/3 today so the district heating you're getting in your pipelines into your house, it's about in average 2/3 is green. And what's not green, well, we still have some for peak load, some natural gas. We have some waste because in Denmark, about 20% of our heat delivery is come from waste incineration, and we still have plastic. We still have some fossil fuels or fossil products left in the waste, and that counts as a fossil product, even though it's only used as a combined heat and power, the waste incineration plants. But there are some little bit left, but we are working on getting it out of our system, and I'll come into that what we hope for the future. Next slide, please. So as I always said, 2/3, more than 50% of total heat demand, 2/3 of all households are on district heating. All homes in Copenhagen, 9%, 98%. And what is a little bit special case about Denmark is that we have 450 networks. I mean, 450 independent networks. That's a lot in a small country. So even in smaller towns in Denmark, we have district heating, and we don't see that so much in other countries. Jump to the next slide, please. We always say, well, district heating, the technology is not complicated. We have companies, I have members who can build the systems. We've done that for 100 years. Yes, of course, there's a lot of innovation, and it does matter who you are engaging with, but it has been done, and we have the knowledge of how to build it. So that's not the case. And one thing I also want to point here, why is district heating so important? Well, I always say that district heating is what we call fuel agnostic. The heat in the pipes doesn't care what does the heat come from. In Denmark, we started out, as you can see before, with oil. We moved then into coal because that came the cheapest source. Well, then we want to be greener. We want to get away from coal. Then became wood pellets. And now we are more going into electrifying the district heating system and utilizing waste heat and also geothermal heat. So that's the direction we're going now. But the pipelines are the same. I mean, they've been in the ground for 50 years. So they've been there all the way through, starting with oil and going on this travel towards being more green. So the big thing is, how do you organize it? How do you finance it? How do you get people together? How do you dig up the roads to get these pipes in the ground? Because when they're first there, I mean, they're there for the next 50 years, and you of course you update your system and renovate your system, but basically the same system. And then you take the cheapest available source, and if you have a green profile, and let's say your city wants to be greener, well, you can shift towards more greening heat supply. So that's what I think the most important thing about district heating. You can it will be there for many years, and you can green your source as you go along. Next slide, please. In Denmark, I'm not saying what you see and what we tell about Denmark and Copenhagen, you can be inspired. You cannot and should not copy it, but be inspired by what we have done, because every nation and every city is a different case. In Denmark, we have a long history of consistent energy policy that I can recommend all countries to do. So we had election last night. I went to bed very late because we couldn't really find out who should be the Social Democrats or the Liberals. But basically, when we talk about energy policy, it doesn't really matter because that is agreed across 90% of the parliament. So it doesn't really matter what government we have, and that's quite very important because it's long-term investment. So stable conditions are needed, and that consistent conditions are needed to get the investments in. We have a special business model in Denmark. We most of the bigger district heating networks are owned by the municipalities in separated companies, but the main part of the 400 district heating companies are owned by the consumers in co-ops. So that's a little bit but what it helps is what we call to get what we call democratic ownership. So you have an interest in your system and an interest in you have an influence on what you're getting in your pipelines. Chuck, you have to help me on the time. How far did we go?
You got 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. And what is very unique about Denmark is we have what we call a non-for-profit, and everybody, when I'm talking with people from the US and Canada, running away and screaming non-for-profit, that's only for communists, but some would call us socialists, but quite of us are liberals also. But it has worked very well in Denmark. The thing is, we operate in Denmark with an internal rate of return about 4%. I know when you go into private operators, you're looking at 2 digits, and of course that makes a difference on how big an investment can you do and how much of a city you will cover with district heating. But I'm explaining this also so you understand why we have so much district heating in Denmark. That is one of the cases. That's one of the reasons. And you can go then and say, well, how do you finance it? Yeah, because we don't have this non-for-profit, you cannot save a lot of money to invest. Now you can go and get this, what we call municipal guaranteed loans. So if you can show that there's a positive business case in it, you can go to a municipality and get a guaranteed loan. So you go to the market and get the cheapest loan available. So that's very, very, very central to this. And then planning and zoning is important too. You have zoning in some cities say, well, we have saying this is laid out for district heating. We cannot force everyone any longer. We could back in history, but we cannot do anymore. But basically, people, if you have opportunity to get district heating, they'll say yes, we want it because they know it's stable, it's cheap, it's green. Can we take the next slide, please? I will. There's a lot of text here, but I'm just something you can see this afterwards also, looking more into details. But generally, is the toolbox for national governments. So we could not do this if we didn't have the support from the when that's the support is the framework. If we didn't have the framework, we could from central place at the national level, we could not make it. That's for sure. And then next slide, the local government also have a big task and can do a difference. You always have to look. Since the 80s, we have in Denmark done heat planning. So that means in all cities, in municipalities, you have to do a heat plan for what is it you want to source of energy to reduce the CO2 in a city. What heat sourcing are you putting into the different areas of your city? And that planning is very important to say, okay, here it makes sense to have district heating, and you help as a city to promote district heating in that area to make sure that because we believe that's the greenest opportunity we have, and you help with coordinate and guarantee between the different stakeholders. You have the entrepreneurs, you have the developers, you have energy companies, so you kind of make sure they talk together and do some project proposals. That's a local government's role in Denmark. And I think the almost second last slide, we because of this situation we have in Denmark or in Europe, everybody going towards district heating because we want to be rid of the gas we have. So we end up in Denmark with about 70% of district heating, of the heat will be covered by district heating. And in 2030, we will have zero carbon from district heating delivered. That's the promise that's been given. And the last slide is showing, well, you have all this, what I call it fossil-free smart system. As I said already, we started out with oil, went to coal. Now we're going into solar heating, depending on, we need some space. We're talking about combined heat and power on bio pellets. We have a lot of industrial waste to be putting into the district heating system. We still have gas combined heat and power. We're gonna get out of that within a year or two. Geothermal heat is developing now in Denmark. It's been a long time on the way, but the two biggest cities in Denmark are developing now geothermal heat, waste to energy, combined heat and power, and heat pumps. I mean, that's going to be the future in Denmark. And then of course also district cooling, because when you're getting more heat pumps, you also will looking into cooling, and we have quite a lot of district cooling development now taking place in Denmark, coming from a very low place. Last slide, please. Thank you. My contact details are here, and if you want to know more about district heating, please sign up for our hot cool, and you're always welcome to reach out. And I cannot promise that I know the answer, but I know who can answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. You're up, Mayal.
Yes, thank you. Then I will also start my video here. Thanks a lot, Lars, for the nice presentation of the context of Denmark, and thank you also to all of you to give me the opportunity to present some of Greater Copenhagen district heating developments and the work of the practitioners in reaching carbon neutrality. So just to present myself a little, I'm working at the municipality of Copenhagen as an energy planner. I do that in close collaboration with the utility that developed the district heating that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And I actually wrote my PhD about Greater Copenhagen district heating developments. And I didn't know a thing about district heating when I started investigating it, and I found it extremely fascinating. Yeah, so yes, you can go to the next slides. So just for the agenda, I'm just going to present a little bit about the developments of the Greater Copenhagen district heating from the beginning, because it's hard to tell about what's happening today without telling about what the past was, how it's functioning today, and then I will show you some of the technological possibilities that we're looking into for the coming future. You can go to the next slide. Yes, so one thing that's very important to understand about district heating in Greater Copenhagen is that, I think you can click one time again, is that in the 70s, Denmark's oil consumption was, oil consumption accounted for 92% of the total gross energy consumption. So it means that when, we were extremely dependent on one source of energy. And then when there was this oil embargo in the 73, then Denmark was hit very strongly. It's one of the countries in Europe that was hit the hardest from the crisis. So there was a kind of a moment of realization that not being dependent on only one fuel was a real problem. So, and from there, the Danish government decided to establish the Danish Energy Agency, because we didn't have any Danish Energy Agency before that time. So it came very late in the development. And as Lars also mentioned, this Danish Energy Agency created the Heat Supply Act, which this Heat Supply Act is a pillar, is a cornerstone of the development of district heating in Denmark. It has made, among other things, of course, but that it has established the fact that municipalities have become responsible for the heating developments, and that those heat development were to be carried according to some socio-economic calculation, which means that only investments that are beneficial for society can be taken. And that is still the case today. And it has really grounded a sense of commitment to this infrastructure that is, for the benefit of the public. And also because it's a non-for-profit framework. So it means that Danish utilities developing district heating are not allowed to make any profit from their development. So they always have to be in balance between the heat they sell and the investment they're going to make in the future. And as the municipalities in Greater Copenhagen, they became responsible for the heat development. So, we had 17 municipalities in the area that were all trying to become heat planners and not really having the experience of it before because they haven't done it before. But looking at it, they decided that it was actually smarter to establish one large transmission network instead of all of them having their own distribution. Unconnected, they decided to make one big network. And actually, it has been, because of some political contentions, it's now operated by 2 transmission companies, but they are connected. So if you go to the next slide, there is a map of how it works. So you have on the west side, you have the what's blue is VEX transmission area, and you have in orange CTR transmission utility. And those 2 are connected, and you could say they work on a daily basis. I think today, you could connect those 2 today. I think the political contention is not as big as before, but the thing is that the same cost and the investment that have been made by so many different municipalities make it in such a way that it's very difficult not to regulatory make those 2 merge. So these district heating transmission companies, they're owned by the municipalities. Copenhagen owns 69% of CTR on the west, and some other with 4 other municipalities, and that's the same on the blue side, on the back side. And now we have a total of 26 municipalities. We're talking about 180 kilometers of transmission pipe, so it's quite tremendous. We have 3 incineration CHP plants. We have one in the west, which is called Karanuveren. I don't know if you can see it on the map. We have one in the north that's called, it's written VF, but it's in the green area for Vestforbrænding. And we have one that's called ARC on the west, as the triangles. Then we also have 2 main biomass combined heat and power plants. We have one in the south, which is called AVV on that map, and Lynetten, and Amagergo AMB. The name don't really matter, but it's just to say that they are placed quite decentral, and it can cause some hydraulic constraints, of course, because most of the demand, 55 of the heat demand, is concentrated in Copenhagen, whereas the heat productions are quite decentral. So sometimes we have a problem having enough heat coming into Copenhagen or getting out of Copenhagen. That can cause some problems. But in total, we have 500,000 households that are connected, and we're producing 30 to 34 gigajoule heat a year. It's tremendous. It's 15% of Denmark's heat demand. And actually, it's written here 98% of Copenhagen is connected to the district heating grid, but I just checked and it's now 99%. So very close to 100. Yes, then you can go to the next slide. And if you look into the evolution of the energy mix in Greater Copenhagen, so on the left, you have the slide, a figure showing how there's been a movement, a shift of the fuels being used. So at the beginning, it was mainly based on coal energy. So we went kind of from a situation of being dependent on oil to being highly relying on coal, and gradually with the use of waste incineration, that's more and more green because we sort out the waste, and the introduction of biomass, we're getting more and more CO2 neutral. And so on the side where the figure of 5, you can see in the red line, that's the emissions of CO2 in the district heating system of Greater Copenhagen from the 90s to 2018. So we're really decreasing them, and hopefully soon we could reach a carbon neutrality. Yes, I think you can go to the next slide. Yes, and so for the transition of the energy system, keeping on transitioning, I mean, I think a transition is never really has a clear start or has a clear end. It's something that's always, it's a work that's ongoing. You could say the practitioners, we're always working for making a transition. But you could say at the beginning, those CHP plants, you could say they were producing mainly electricity, and surplus heat, and heat was kind of a surplus. It was a byproduct of the electricity consumption. If you click one time on the slide, only once, then we have introduced the sustainable biomass and also more and more sustainable electricity production, which has meant that the price of electricity has decreased also, and actually the fact that for CHP plants, the byproduct is not surplus heat anymore, but it's more electricity that has become the byproduct, and the main product has become surplus heat. So there has been a change in the way the CHP plants have been operated. So that has been some challenges. And now if you click on here one more time again, this is the energy system that we're looking into and trying to develop at the moment. So a lot more complicated and intertwined. So for example, one of the tasks I'm working with is to implement those heat pumps, large-scale heat pumps, so that we can reduce the use of sustainable biomass. We would like to establish some carbon capture on the CHP plants that we have, so that we could, and by shipping it and storing it, we could manage to have a carbon neutrality, a climate positivity actually. We would also like to use the CO2 to make new gas or new fuels that can e-fuels that can be used in shipping and in planes and so on. So those are the, this is the puzzle that we're looking into. And if you move something somewhere, if you put too many heat pumps, or if you put too little of this or that, it makes a big difference in the system. So everyone is we're all trying to, we're working on eggs and trying to make sure that we make the right decision at the right time, because it takes time, of course, to implement this new technology. And the last point that I want to say, I'm not sure how much time I still have, but one of the problems is that you could say that the district heating sector has moved from being producing electricity to being a consumer of electricity. If you see here, there is more and more arrows going down from electricity to the heat sector. So there is this electrification of the system, which means that we're a bit worried maybe, or it's a new challenge in planning enough sustainable electricity production. In Copenhagen, we're quite limited in the space that we have. I mean, it's a very dense city, so we cannot just establish a wind park on land or train with offshore, but it's also quite limited, of course. So those are some of the new aspects we're working with, and of course the economic and the regulation and are not in place yet. So so there is a lot of unknown in the development of the energy system, but we keep on working, and I think there is a good will from the practitioners in keeping on working in this system and towards carbon neutrality. Yes, and I think that was my last words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maëlle. We've got a few minutes for questions. So just to sort of sum up what you and Lars were saying, the energy crisis of the 70s seemed to have a particularly serious effect on Denmark, and Denmark reacted quite strongly with that law that you were talking about before. So what are the remaining significant problems or issues with district energy in Denmark that we should know about in Toronto and North America?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think some of the challenges, and Lars, you are more than welcome to develop these thoughts, but I think the socioeconomic calculation, they also can be a barrier in establishing new technologies because, for example, at the moment, biomass, if you look into the investment that are being made and the economies of scale and so on, it can look like biomass is the best way to go. But actually, if we want to develop the system towards heat pumps and other kind of resources to not be so dependent on biomass and to reduce the amount of biomass, then we would have to implement this new technology that are not necessarily the best in terms of new investments. So that can impede our investment into alternative technologies. Maybe you have something to say to that, Lars.
Lars?
No, I agree. You of course, with this model you have in Denmark, where you have available so very easy access to finances, you sometimes can run into some wrong investments and over investments. But then what happens then is that consumers pays more. Because that's the model in Denmark, that you pay for the cost of your delivery. But and biomass has been for the sector in Denmark has been seen as a what we call an immediate source, so something a transition source going from away. That's the only way we could get away from coal and oil now, and we know that in 20 years from now it will be more, as Mael says, more electrical supply. But the challenge right now in Denmark is actually everybody screaming for more district heating to get away from the gas. So we simply do not have enough labor. We do not have enough employees to make that transition now, because gas becomes so expensive in Europe. So it's not only Denmark; it's the whole Europe is want to get away from gas, and then district heating is one of the solutions.
And
manpower.
Is the gas imposed shortage in Europe generally driving people to district energy in other countries?
Oh yeah, big time. So we have lack of district heating technology. We have lack of manpower. We have lack of everything to build it fast enough right now.
Okay, and have you sort of turned district energy into a kind of export industry or anything? Do you see your strength in this as something you can export services and products?
The main part of my members are companies who export the technology and also the know-how, how to build systems. So yes, we have a very strong district energy industry in Denmark, but the main knowledge is on what we call low temperature hot water systems, and it's not in what's the name? It's always in lower temperature district heating we have in Denmark. So that's where we have the knowledge also technology-wise. So yes, it is a big industry now today in Denmark and employ a lot of people, yes.
And are you exporting to Canada?
Oh yes. some of our members are exporting both pipes and valves and pumps and whatever we have controlling systems, yes.
Okay, and then okay, that sounds interesting. It sounds like you're getting kind of an international kick from your success domestically. And one of the things you mentioned about the domestic situation is that you have many systems. You said there were about 400 systems or something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it almost seems to me like district energy, district heating is sort of made for Denmark, because it can works in small communities, it enables this sort of deep penetration into smaller communities in Denmark. Is that accurate?
I don't know, Mael, do you have a comment on that, or should I take it?
I think it's more. I think there's something that struck me when I did my PhD was about, and there is this Danish way of thinking that's very. People like to do things collectively. There is a sense of collectivity in Denmark, and it's reflected in the district heating business, but it's also reflected in the way we own properties in Denmark. It's also reflected in the wind industry development. That was also a community-based development. So I think that has been some of the fundamentals. And then I think there is waste in Denmark to be burnt, and I think CHP plants have been a part of the developments also in small cities.
And that's why I don't think if you look at other nations that in big scale you can go to such small towns as we do in Denmark. You need mainly to be where you have a high, big load and very centralized load mainly. But because that will demand a business model that we have similar to Denmark, where you don't need a big internal rate of return to make these investments in a smaller towns. So I think most places you need some density to make it in most places.
Okay. Well, look, this is very interesting, and you're going to have a chance to talk some more, but we want to stay on schedule and move on. But thank you very much for this, very interesting presentation on district energy in Copenhagen and Denmark. Thank you, Lars and Neil. All right, now we're going to hear from our Toronto panelists. Morgan McGregor, Senior Vice President of Energy Planning and Development at Enwave Energy. Diego Mandelbaum, Vice President of Development at Creative Energy. And Shirin Karoubi, the Deputy Head of Greenbuild North America and the Sector Expert at the Danish Council in Toronto. So again, the bios are available in the chat. Toronto panelists, please go ahead and present.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Chuck. Appreciate it and appreciate being here today. So I'm just gonna kick us off today with a sort of very quick introduction to Enwave. I think a number of folks on this call are probably familiar with us in the Toronto context. But just to do a bit of level setting for those who may not be on who Enwave is. I think before I even jump into that, it's probably clear to most people on this call listening in some of the large contextual differences just from hearing the Danish presentations earlier, which were very interesting. So next slide, please. Quick intro to Enwave. We are an owner-operator of district energy systems, one of the largest core competency DE providers in North America, actually. I think a lot of people here, like I said, are familiar with our Toronto system, but we also operate and own systems in Charlottetown, Markham, London, and Windsor, as well as Toronto. And across those systems, we have significant heating, cooling, as well as electrical generation assets. In addition to those operating systems, we have a number of low carbon systems that are currently under development across the GTA. And our technologies range from CHP to thermal storage to deep lake cooling, geoexchange, biomass, waste to energy. So we cover a pretty large gamut of different technologies that we've incorporated into our systems over time. Next slide, please. This image, now specifically focusing on Toronto, is a representation of our Toronto district energy system. So it's a map of our heating and cooling assets that are serving the downtown core of Toronto. Our roots, the Toronto roots of the system go back to the 1960s, starting with some hospitals, and they've evolved over time, I think, to where we are now today as Enwave. Currently, we have over 90 million square feet of connected building space to our system. We serve shopping centers, commercial buildings, hospitals, institutions, hotels, retail space. And our customers and our partners are some of the largest, most prominent buildings in the city. We work very closely with them on a daily basis. One of the things I like about this picture in particular that I just wanted to draw attention to is the sort of arrows in yellow to either side of the graphic. So they're intended actually to represent our eastern and western system expansions. But I think symbolically, they represent something I think that's directly related to a key to the success of the system to date, and a key to our continued success as we go forward, which is really how did we get here and be so successful, which I think is a continued drive to expand the system, improve, and find value for our customers. So I think quite different from the Danish context. We operate in a very different market in terms of our incentives and policies surrounding district energy, and really to affect widespread change and be successful, we need solutions and systems that are commercially viable at scale, and that we can take to scale so that end users can get the benefits, but again, that they remain commercially viable from that value proposition. And that's something that we've historically and continue to focus on with our systems. And on that note, just a couple of images across the bottom that people might be familiar with related to our system, maybe some not so much. I just wanted to highlight a few quick examples of those innovations that I'm talking about that are in play and in practice today. So starting on the left, you have the Deep Lake water cooling system, which I think most people on this call are probably familiar with. So world's largest deep lake cooling system, where we use the cold water from the bottom of the lake in place of traditional chilling equipment, and able to displace upwards of 80% of electrical consumption versus standard chilling systems, as well as saving hundreds of millions of gallons of water annually with those systems. Next to that, an example of our heat recovery systems. So we're a large recycler of low-grade waste energy, and implementing heat recovery through our systems as part of our energy sources, and we're continuously expanding that. Next to that, we have the Well, which is a large development. You can actually see it in the pictures of the west side of downtown, which is RioCan and Allied development. And as part of that, a 2 million gallon storage tank was put below P7, so a very large infrastructure project of that development, which enables us to store hot and chilled water to take advantage of our deep lake cooling and hot water loop assets, and optimize that dispatch to be most efficient and effective. And then to the right, just a couple of points I wanted to touch on, and I think this ties a little bit to what the Danish panelists were just saying. I'm actually got an image here of Mattamy Spring Water Development in Markham. This is very interesting. This is a first of its kind in Ontario, single family home district system connecting over 300 homes in the Springwater development. They're being served by GeoExchange with significant carbon reduction versus traditional heating. And uniquely in this situation, the boreholes were put in the rights of way in that development. So very interesting example of doing this at a lower density scale. And then to the right of that, this is just intended to represent some additional low carbon system development we're working on through the Toronto area. So in Toronto, as well as in neighboring cities like Mississauga, we're seeing an increasing interest in developments, a lot of residential development, in finding tangible ways to help them achieve their carbon targets and pathways. And we're working on developing a number of systems that incorporate low carbon technologies like GeoExchange and sewage effluent as a few examples into those systems. So I think that's it for me from the slides.
All right, thank you, Morgan, and move on from there to, I guess, Diego for his presentation.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. Beautiful picture. I took it myself. We can probably move to the next slide and get into the meat of it. Just a bit of background on Creative Energy. Fundamentally, we're a district energy development company. We conceptualize, design, build, own, and operate district energy systems that can instigate massive reductions in GHGs. But it's sort of interesting, just this slide I'll speak to our background, the next slide I'll speak to what we're doing now, and then we can get onto the discussion portion. Our company was actually founded as a fuel switch company. So back in the 60s, downtown Vancouver, which is where our headquarters are, had a bunch of smog and pollution issues from fuel heating and oil heating and coal heating of buildings. And so our founders thought, hey, great idea. Why don't we build a giant natural gas steam boiler plant, run steam piping to these buildings and let them transition away from coal and fuel oil onto the clean fuel of the future, which at the time was natural gas. And of course, today we're all figuring out how to get off of that. But that was sort of the history of how we were founded back in 1968. And then we grew organically as a district energy company in Vancouver, single asset utility, really connecting one customer after the next. And in 2014, we were serving around 45 million square feet of real estate in downtown Vancouver, including St. Paul's Hospital, BC Place, all the big marquee developments. If anybody here is familiar with the iconic Gastown steam clocks, that's actually our steam. But then in 2014, we had new ownership that really came with a brand new vision, which was how do we turn a utility company into an energy development company that can instigate these reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. And so just to sort of cap on the Vancouver piece, today, the yellow piping that you see there on the right, top right, that's our distribution network. But what's interesting, that blue line that you see is actually a transmission line that we're now building in partnership with BC Hydro to begin to decarbonize our central plant. 2024, we expect this to be complete, and it'll be one of the largest decarbonization projects in all of North America. And so we're now trying to replicate that. Okay, how do we bring this to cities across North America? And so if we could go to the next slide. That's really what we're doing now. So we have about 15 new district energy systems that we're developing between British Columbia, Ontario, Alberta, Pacific Northwest, and California. And somewhat similar to Enwave, we're technology agnostic. We'll really look at mix and match the right technologies to fundamentally to get the best economics while preserving the sustainability value of our district energy systems. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll just quickly touch on some of the projects that we're developing, technologies that we've used. And so on the top left is actually a project that we broke ground on maybe a year ago with Minto, who's a developer out in Oakville, which is a community energy system with 3 large interconnected geo-exchange fields that'll serve 5 residential towers. As you move to the right, we've partnered with Thompson Rivers University, who has a 0 carbon target by 2030. And so we're actually retrofitting a brand new district energy system into their campus, fundamentally extracting heat from the air, connecting to all their old boiler plants, decommissioning their boiler plants, and allowing them to ring that carbon neutral bell by hopefully 2030. Horseshoe Bay, a super exciting project for us, which is commissioned now. 2 summers ago, we actually sunk 2 giant heat exchangers into the Pacific Ocean, anchored them to the ground floor, ran HDPE piping from those heat exchangers to a central heat pump plant. And we're now heating and cooling 5 residential buildings by using the Pacific Ocean as a giant thermal battery, virtually eliminating natural gas and getting rid of cooling towers. Really exciting project for us. CENOC on the top right, we just did the announcement on this maybe 2 weeks ago, but have been working on this for about 4 years. The Squamish Nation just outside of Vancouver is developing 11 residential towers, 6,000 units of purpose-built rental. This was actually the largest CMHC loan in the history of Canada. About $1.4 billion went into this development just for the first phase. And we partnered with the nation and with Metro Vancouver, who's the regional municipality, to bring in a large municipal sewer main. And we're extracting heating from that sewer to heat this development, which is touted to be the largest 0 carbon rental development in all of Canada. Bringing it a little bit more locally, bottom left, Mirvish Village, which actually I think ULI, we're hosting a tour in a few weeks. That I think was one of the first sort of private sector district energy nodes built in Toronto outside of Enwave's downtown core. And that's essentially heating a city block of purpose-built rental through a CHP microgrid and heating and cooling system, with hopes of expanding that beyond. And then even as we go out to Whitby, we're working with a real estate partner there, looking at extracting heat from a sewer to heat about 3 million square feet of condos and residential. So the list goes on, but this is the kind of projects that we're looking to get off the ground. And fundamentally, our role is finding creative ways to harness heat from different areas, be it the earth, the ground, the ocean, the lake. In Seattle, we're extracting hospital waste heat, putting it to productive use to enable GHG reductions while preserving affordability and resiliency. So I think with that probably concludes the sort of introduction to creative energy, and we can move on to the discussion part of this panel.
Did Sharon have a presentation, or are we just going to go on to discussion?
Oh, that's right. Sorry, apologies for that. I will go off camera and let Sharon present hers.
Thanks, Sharon.
Hi. Am I presenting mine? I sent it last night.
I,
Okay. One second.
yeah, go ahead.
One second. Well, just while I try to get it up, just a quick. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't share it, so it's okay. Just a little bit of background. So I work with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and our role is primary export promotion, where we assist Danish companies getting into the North American market within district energy. However, we assist quite a bit with public diplomacy. And what that means is supporting local government and private and campuses in getting their district energy systems up and running through funding support, knowledge sharing exercises, and just general kind of expertise sharing. I wanted to kind of give an overview of a difference between Denmark and Toronto. I had a slide, but it's not letting me share, but it's okay. So kind of just a quick overview in terms of what does Denmark have, and then what does Toronto have, just to kind of wrap up the discussions that we've been doing so far. I'm going to be focusing a bit on the policy side, because as a planner, I also think that's a major support for market drivers. And as it was discussed with earlier on the Copenhagen case study, so Denmark has okay, great, there it is. So what does Denmark have? We discussed this, and it has a Danish Heating Supply Act, which was brought in the 1970s. So as Lars mentioned, this is pretty integral in terms of district energy for Denmark and Copenhagen. Why it came about, there was a major oil crisis in the 70s, as was mentioned, and it was pretty detrimental for Denmark. It was 100% reliant on energy imports. So you can see how an energy crisis then would be pretty catastrophic and kind of be a major catalyst for a policy change for heating. Toronto, Canada doesn't have that. We have a pretty good set of resources that we're still using in terms of natural gas. And outside of that, Denmark has a culture of cooperative ownership, which Maël was mentioning before, and this came from the agriculture sector and went into energy. But this kind of this sharing of infrastructure has been pretty integral. And as a result, from the Heating Supply Act, there's a nonprofit clause where you can't kind of make money off of it. So that's not something that Canada has either. So it definitely sets up a completely different market landscape that we, I guess, isn't necessarily something that doesn't mean we can't do district energy. It just means it's a different way of navigating the market. Within Denmark, in terms of policy, which is something we don't have either, is an obligation to connect and remain connected. So when I work with municipalities and some developers, that's a major issue for them, as we're not going to build something if people can't connect to it, because that's a huge loss financially for whoever wants to implement that district energy system. There's no guarantee that people will hook up to it. There's also regulated fuel types in Denmark. As was mentioned, biomass is kind of the way to go now. And there are rules where you have to use biomass versus having to use natural gas, and natural gas is slowly becoming disincentivized as well. And they've switched out of coal as well, and we have as well, or we're getting to that process, but we still haven't really regulated fuel sources as much in the same way that Denmark has. Something else which was pretty important is that sustainability is considered in property value assessment. And this is pretty huge. I mean, this is gonna be reflected more in the building sector, but your property value is assessed to be higher if it has sustainability elements, and that does sometimes include a district hooking up to a district energy system or having the ability to do that. I think that would be a major game changer within Canadian landscape if that's something that was brought in for us as well. They have taxes on use for fossil fuels. The cost of natural gas is much higher. I mean, prior to what's going on right now, it was still much higher compared to what Canada has access to. And as it was mentioned before, there's a pretty big commitment to waste to energy in Denmark, not in the same way that we have. So that's just to kind of give a background as to kind of what has set up Denmark to and Copenhagen to be the way it is. And looking at Toronto specifically, what do we have? We don't have a national policy that Denmark and Copenhagen has, which would be very, very supportive in district energy planning. However, we do have some things that we can rely on and municipalities can look at. So we have the green development standards. And so that's something like the Toronto Green Standards, where council can, put in higher tiers to strive to. And we have that for buildings, but that does include, I can't remember which of the tiers, but it includes being district energy ready for one of the buildings. So it's certain things like that we can start incorporating to at least support the private sector, which is mainly leading district energy within the Toronto landscape. We have our Municipal Act and our Ontario Planning Act, and these basically give us tools, give municipalities tools to kind of start putting in policies and regulations that would require, mandatory hookup connections. The places that I know of that have done this is in Vancouver, and I understand that they have their own charter that makes it a bit different as a municipality, but we do have access to zoning bylaws, which, us have a specific interest in the province to put towards energy distribution and concern for the surrounding environment. Some are vague, some are a bit more specific, but it's still something that municipalities can argue that there is, on the policy side, support from the Ontario government. And something else that we have is waste and access to biomass. Biomass in Canada is actually being shipped out to be used as energy. I don't think a lot of people know that, and it does sometimes get shipped to Denmark. So the fact that we have quite a bit of fuel sources that at our disposal, I think we should start actually seriously looking at that as opposed to natural gas. There's the carbon tax, which is hitting natural gas. It's a bit, it doesn't seem like a big deal right now, but the carbon tax is doing what it does, and it's over time will be a larger deal, and it'll start getting a bit more expensive. That it doesn't make sense that that's the kind of fuel source we're looking at. And waste in Toronto specifically, and Canada, we don't really have a recycling economy here. So we do ship out our waste quite a bit. If we were to use that the same way that municipal waste is being incinerated within Copenhagen to be used as heat, we have the fuel source there. It's something we can go towards. But like I mentioned, there's a different culture here. Municipalities don't necessarily want to start their own heating sector. Enwave was the city of Toronto's, but they sold it off. I think most people know that story. And now it acts as its own corporation, which is great, and it's doing a great job. But what can municipalities do in this situation? They can help facilitate a lot of what is impending developers from going into district energy. So Toronto wants to do district energy now, which is great, but there's the underground real estate where to put pipes and stuff. There isn't a lot of room for that, and the city can be a great help in terms of assisting with wayfinding for that, because it's a little bit of, I understand, a pretty big struggle for developers. And something else is that if this municipality doesn't want to own the district energy heating supply networks, then they can help facilitate discussions and cooperation between the stakeholders, because there's quite a bit of stakeholders involved in setting up district energy systems. It's really hard to navigate if there's no set policy to dictate who does what. So I see the municipalities really putting in a big effort on this end. And I don't want to go over time, so I'll kind of leave it at that, and then maybe we can just go into the discussion. If there's any questions about what I said right now, Chuck, I can speak to it.
Yeah. This was very useful. Let's just hold this for a couple of minutes and keep this in mind. We'll have a few questions just for the Toronto panel, and then we will segue into the joint panel. So thank you. This is good. All right. Our first question, which Morgan McGrader will start out answering, and the others can then pitch in. How can Toronto professionals look at Copenhagen's gold standard in district energy and apply this standard in Toronto? Morgan?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I think it's a good question. And I think first off, just from some context, saying that slide that Sharon just ran through was very useful, and I think very interesting comparison between the two, and very interesting to see how far, I would say, in my opinion, that we've come and what we've done here in the city and also surrounding areas of the GTA, given some of the pretty stark differences, I think, in the approaches we need to take because of the platforms that are there. I think you ask a really good question. I think the question, if I can reframe it slightly, is, not just what sort of professionals and real estate professionals need to do within the city, but sort of what we jointly need to do. So I think to the last comment Sharon made, it is definitely by nature of district energy collaborative requirement. You do have multiple stakeholders. And I think there's a couple of key groups in there. So there's the property owners, developers, builders. There's the district energy providers themselves. So folks like Enwave and Creative who are on here as well as the municipalities and what they can do to jointly support that. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind to me immediately. One is, I would say this is joint across the three groups I just mentioned, is, acknowledging the benefits of district energy. Being fair and attributing value to the benefits that district energy brings, whether that's on the carbon front, the real estate savings front. I think there's an acknowledgement required on behalf of the end users, as well as through the municipalities to support, and put meat around some of that. For example, valuing extra floor space, for example, and making that really tangible. I think that another key piece of the puzzle is, on our side of the equation, probably where Diego's sitting as well, is facilitating to the extent possible and simplifying processes. So, these do require collaboration, and they're different often than traditional building, modes of putting up, an individual set of systems. And I think that, if we can work together to simplify that process, that just facilitates it across the board in terms of uptake. And then I think lastly, I would say sort of educate / champion. So one, where there has been success on behalf of those property owners and builders, sort of internally on their process side, championing that and advocating, sort of to push in that direction, as well as on the municipal side. So what can we do in terms of incentives, additional standards like Sharon ran through, to actually, low cost funding to actually put some, arms and legs around that and give a bit more of a platform to build on. So I think those are the sort of first few things that come to mind in response to that question.
All right, well, let's pass on to question 2 so we make it through all of our questions and then go to the joint panel. Diego, 3 years ago, district energy was not a central concern to real estate professionals in Toronto. Today, it is a central concern of virtually all real estate professionals in Toronto. Why does district energy matter to them right now?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I think that's a really good question. And I think it has to do with more of a societal shift to looking at carbon. 3 years ago or before that, no one was really looking at what are our carbon emissions. They might talk about it, but the conversation was largely around energy efficiency. And I think as we're seeing global warming having more real impacts, like as an example, I grew up in British Columbia, a town 200 kilometers away from me, literally burnt up and fully vanished 2 years ago. People are starting to shift and say we have to do something about carbon emissions. And so what we're seeing now is a manifestation of that from a carbon tax. So we send the price signal as it's going to $170 per ton by 2030 here. We're seeing buyers actually asking, what is my heating and cooling systems? Where's my electricity coming from? I want to buy into a renewable building. We're seeing corporations, both public and private, developing ESG plans with more tangible metrics in there. We're seeing even where the sources of capital are coming from, going towards renewable and low carbon, both on the debt and the equity side. And so this really all comes down to how do we reduce carbon? And then district energy is sort of the logical conclusion of that. When you have the right load density, and you have it as a given that we have to reach some sort of a carbon neutral or close to scenario, you just follow the numbers, and economically district energy comes out as typically the most cost-effective way of achieving low carbon solutions when you have the right density.
Okay, well, that's I'm going to remember that last sentence there. All right, let's use Sharon's question to sort of segue to the joint panel. So kind of last question for the Toronto panel and segueing to joint panel. in terms of both institutions and technology, in what sectors could district energy models from Copenhagen most improve district energy in Toronto? What specific district energy innovations from Copenhagen should Toronto import? And we learned earlier that we are importing.
I can speak to that. I can start speaking to that a bit and see if anyone else.
Yes,
has something to add.
please do.
In terms of kind of what to adapt from Copenhagen, I mean, I kind of as I laid out, it's a very different landscape entirely. So something that I have noticed though is that Copenhagen went through this whole process, 50 years ago when they went through a generation 1 district energy system all the way to what we have now. And Toronto in Ontario, Canada had district energy systems a very long time ago. It's not a new technology. We just never kept kind of evolving it the way that Denmark has. So what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of similarities in the technologies being used. So they're looking at generation 4, generation 5 district energy systems, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now as well. We didn't go through that whole process. So what we were hoping to adapt, and this is what I'm noticing when speaking to folks here and in Denmark, is that there's a big need for certain technologies. Looking at heat pumps specifically is something that a lot of people are asking for. People are considering more ambient loop systems in Toronto or in the Ontario area, or they're starting to, and that's also something that Copenhagen/Denmark is doing now as well. So I see a lot of opportunities to adapt and looking at the specific technologies that they're using right now, less so than the kind of the planning, which I don't think Canada is in the position to adopt policy change in any real sort of time.
Okay. And how about you also worked with Greenbuild? How about general standards, which are not, I don't think they're quite up on your slide here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long response that would require, but Canada has goals for energy and for buildings and energy efficiency. We're not doing anything on the public side, but the goals that we have it's a little bit hard to achieve with the current market that we have. Everyone it's kind of going from like 0 to 100. So I see the public sector rapidly like kind of trying to see what they can do in terms of policy and requirements. And I'm noticing that it's going to be, there's a big interest in labeling systems and kind of just showing and benchmarking, this is what this building has, then this is what this building has. So we're going that route, but in terms of being able to reach the timeline that Canada has dictated, I don't think our policies are going to get there in time for 2030, 2050, if we're looking at buildings net zero, existing and new. So I think that there's a big opportunity for our markets in the private sector within Toronto and Canada to really support this and push that forward, because there's no way it's just going to be policy alone to reach our goals.
All right, thank you. All right, now we're going to segue right into the joint panel. So please welcome back Lars and Miel.
Thank you.
And just a few questions, and it's a whoever wants to answer the questions, go ahead and answer them. We can just have questions and answers, or even have a dialogue among all of the panelists. What is Copenhagen doing to keep its edge in district energy? And what is Toronto doing to keep its district energy edge besides today's panel? It's another way of saying who's in charge of innovation for district energy, I guess.
Mel, I think you can answer that for Copenhagen.
I was thinking about what I should say, because I think it's getting more and more complicated, because in a way, some of the new technology, they're not driven by the district heating system necessarily anymore. For example, if you think about carbon capture and storage, that's not really the district heating utilities that are in charge of that. It's the waste incineration plants or the politicians. So yeah, I'm not sure what to answer to that question actually. I think there's a lot of things going on, but some of the issues that we're actively working on in Greater Copenhagen is to find areas where heat pumps can be based, for example. That's a big challenge in a dense city. Then there's of course some regulatory issues, how to integrate surplus heat from new technology as Power-to-X or carbon capture storage.
But there is, I can maybe supply here. There is Copenhagen has some, and Denmark want to be the heat supply be CO2 neutral by 2030, and that's pretty soon. And there's a huge pressure from the cities to the district heating utilities to reach these goals. So the city of Copenhagen has some ambitious climate goals, and they can only reach those by working very closely together with the utilities and put a lot of pressure on them to develop the heating systems that is CO2 emission free. So yes, it's not only the frameworks, it's also a huge pressure from local cities who want to go this path on be CO2 neutral in 2030. So in practice, it's actually implemented by the district heating utilities, but of course in close cooperation with the cities that are on the board also on these district heating companies. Yeah.
I may add into that response. I mean, I think the short answer, and I hope that Morgan agrees with me, is that Toronto is leading the edge on innovation. Now, I say that mostly because I'm a competitive person, like to win, but I will share just a little bit of context to this. Sharon was talking about sort of first generation, second generation, up to fifth generation district energy systems. And I don't want to go down a deep technical rabbit hole, but fundamentally what that is a reduction in the temperature that we use to transfer the heating throughout the cities. And Canada, to a large degree, in Toronto, sort of skipped over a certain generation because of our apprehension to bioenergy and biomass. If you saw Shireen's slide, she said biomass availability. I agree. But you will see that out of 10 biomass projects that get studied in Toronto, they normally become very viable, but get essentially shut down for public perception. And so we never had that transition that Copenhagen did, but now we're kind of hopping ahead to that, what we would say fourth and fifth generation system, which is mass deployment of heat pump technology to capture and move heat around from creative places, be it the ocean or a lake or a hospital. And so for that sort of skip of generation, I actually do think that Toronto is probably pushing the needle, but admittedly, I'm very biased as I say that.
I agree. I was actually going to respond sort of with, I think what we're doing to keep our edges is exactly what you just said, Diego, what we're doing now. So we're moving forward. We're doing this in absence of some of these sort of mandating policies. We're finding ways to do it smarter, faster, better, so that we can do it commercially, which is key here, I think, is the theme that everyone's hearing in this conversation. Here specifically, being Toronto and surrounding area, and I think that is what we're doing. We're seeing new developments come to the table. We gave some examples earlier, I think, both Diego and myself, and where people are doing that. And I think key is what Sharon was saying. In absence of sort of hard and fast policy, what we're seeing is some of these cities, municipalities coming to the table where they can with what they can support us on in these places. So, I gave the example of Markham boreholes in the right of way, supporting stakeholder engagement, working with us when we want to look at things like different heat recovery technologies and using assets, wastewater as an example. And I think people are coming together here to do that. And I think your answer was, I'm in agreement, Diego.
Just on the point about the city, so if this map that I'm pointing at here, that's actually a mapping of that the city of Toronto put together of their sewer network across all of Toronto with estimates of how much heat is in there to try to support these kind of low carbon developments. So it just gives you an example, though culturally we're never going to be where Copenhagen is from the co-op perspective, but the city is trying to remove red tape and provide assistance to enable and incentivize these kind of developments.
Agree. And a big one, if I can just add a tangible example to that point exactly on the city is, so I mentioned deep lake cooling, and I think most people are around here, you know, we're doing the fourth intake project right now, which is a perfect example of a, a project that involved a lot of that cross collaboration and dialogue and cooperation with the city of Toronto specifically. So case in point.
All right. Final question. What is the next big thing in district energy? It would be great to hear from everyone on this.
I will say what I think it is not, which is hydrogen.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well, none of the economics or the science that I've seen really make it sort of the silver bullet that it's getting marketed to be, but there's certainly a big push on that. I just, and the reason I say that is almost every new development that we look at, somebody asks, what about hydrogen? Can we just plug in hydrogen? And I don't see it as the silver bullet that some folks are portraying it to be.
All right. Any other thoughts on next big thing or something that is overhyped and is not the next big thing?
Maybe I have a comment on the hydrogen part. I totally agree with Diego. But what we see and what we will see, well, will probably be in the next 5. We have some developments in Denmark for hydrogen plants and power to X plants, as we call them. Is try to get them located close to where we also have a heat demand. So actually in the processes there is a lot of waste heat, and actually we can see that the hydrogen projects will increase the return on or the economy between like 5 or 10% by also they can sell the heat and use the heat. So we're helping them to make a better business case. And there's all this waste heat we can put into our system. So yes, but don't burn the hydrogen, but the uses for higher valuable sources definitely. But one of the game changes in Denmark is very much on, because we have so much developed district heating. It's more the sources and the upcoming things, big things we break through now is huge investments in geothermal heat. We have in the 2 largest cities we believe good chances to cover about 20% of our heating demand from geothermal heat, and then it's all the investments in large scale heat pumps, because we will in Denmark have periods where we have surplus electricity, when I can also call it waste electricity, too much electricity that cannot be used because the wind power production will be simply so huge and large in Denmark. So there is a synergy we can help the power system by actually integrating these 2 systems together, because we're helping the power system to when they have too much power, when they have too much electricity, but also we can produce electricity when there's a need for electricity, when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. We have some combined heat and power plants we can turn on. So there's a close interplay between heating and electricity sector in Denmark in the future.
All right, well, let's leave it there. We're out of time, but thank you, panelists, for appearing today. Thank you, Copenhagen, with Lars Himmelrose and Neil Casaru. And thank you, Toronto, with Morgan McGregor of Enwave, Diego Mandelbaum of Creative Energy, and Shirin Karubi of Greenbelt and the Danish Council in Toronto. How about a round of applause for these fine panelists that have given us their time today? All right. And thank you to everyone who submitted your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer them today, but we're going to capture your questions and use them in the future to inform future programming by ULI Toronto. Now I'm going to send it back over to Tom.
Thank you, Chuck. On behalf of ULI Toronto, I want to thank all of our speakers for a really interesting panel discussion and joining us today. It's been great to hear everyone's perspective. It's been really exciting to have an international panel as well from both sides of the Atlantic. For me personally, it was super interesting to hear about the consistent energy policy and cooperative approach taken in Denmark, and how we in North America can be inspired by that to incentivize future generation projects, especially sustainability being considered in property value assessments, and what a game-changing effect that could have in Canada. Again, we want to thank all of our sponsors and BTY Group for sponsoring today's webinar. And just to close off, be sure to check out ULI Toronto's upcoming programs. We have some very exciting events lined up. One especially timely program is a lunchtime webinar next week on Tuesday, November 8th. The title of that being the new housing supply action plan, understanding the most sweeping policy reforms in a generation. So I encourage everyone to check out ULI website for upcoming events and links provided in the chat. So we're ahead of time slightly, but thanks to everyone again for attending, and have a great day.
Yes, thanks to all. Thanks very much. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.